Hello, my name is Saremy, and today I'm going to show you how to deal with the seat of a pants pattern if it's too full or too flat for you. And spoiler alert, this works for both men and women. Now remember, this adjustment might not be exactly what you need for all of your fitting issues, but it's going to help if you're finding that mostly your side seams are fine, your waist seam is fine, your inseam is fine, and you're just finding that this area right here of the pant is either like sagging and too loose, or maybe it's too tight and you're seeing drag lines pointing to that area. And maybe the rise is a little too short or too long, but really in this upper seat area, we're not talking about the inseam or the thigh area. You might have two different fit issues or more, but this is basically going to help you sort out giving you volume or less volume in the seat area. All right, let's get to it. All right, these are some jeans that I made my husband a few years ago, and I'm about to make them again. So we were looking at decreasing some of the volume in the seat area. So first I'm kind of looking at what kind of length I can remove, and then I look at sort of the vertical pinch that would reduce some circumference. And so that's what I would probably do. I'd sort of pin out the volume, see what he thinks, and I would pin a horizontal pinch, and then I would also pin out some vertical amounts. Sorry, my arm is in the way here. But this is what I would do to kind of see what we want to get rid of. We're not trying to pin too much. We don't want to create another issue. All right, in this example here, the pattern is too full for the body. And you can see that the pants are sagging down here, and you're getting extra circumference here and extra length. And if this was the entire pant here, you would really kind of see this sagginess back here. And probably after walking around a little bit, it might pool under the bum down here. This means that we need to take out some length and some circumference. And here I would just pin this out as well. Figure out exactly how much we want and where we want to remove it. And you know, we're probably going to be pinching across the center back seam there. You're going to try and taper this to nothing at the side seam, so it ends when we get to the side seam here. This is going to be pretty hard to do this to yourself, all by on your own. So what I always recommend is propping up your camera and taking a video of yourself, and face the camera, center yourself, and then turn around on the spot so your back is facing, and then take a lot of time, take a long video, because you're going to be surprised how fast you're moving, and it's really hard to see what you're doing, and you might get your arm or your hand in the way or something. So try different things at different angles, and then feel the fabric back here. Do things like this in the video. You might not be able to pin it. Maybe you can, but if you can't, do things like this. Grab the fabric like this, and sort of get a feel. Remember how that feels in your fingers, so that when you take these pants off, you have something to be like, okay, this is, I look back at the video, this is about where I need to remove this. And this is what it felt like. And now I'm going to pin this out and see if I'm close. It's worth the effort. You may have to do it a few times, but it's better than sewing another muslin right away, right? You want to make sure that your next muslin is hopefully your last muslin. Let's pull out some of this circumference here. And again, we're trying to go to zero. We're pinning it out to nothing at the waist and hems and the side seam, but you're most likely going to need to pin out some length on the rise here. And when you get to this little juncture here, just do your best. That's how it looks over here. I think I can do more. And then, you know, when you get something kind of close, you're going to know, all right, this is about where I need to do this, and I need to take out this much in length and this much, you know, this much in length, that's your horizontal, and then this much in circumference, which is your vertical pinning. And you can pin both sides. It's worth it to take a lot of time to pin this really nicely. Try it on, take your video again, see if you like that, and look at everything. Are you pulling too hard? You know, are you getting some drag lines? Are you finding that, oh, I'm accidentally pinning through the side seam here? Well, I don't really want to lose any length of the side seam, especially I don't want to transfer this to the front. The front's fine. So be really honest about it. Make sure you're going to 0 when you get to that seam line there. And then you'll be able to make the change, which I'm going to show you how to do. All right, let's do the adjustment on this pattern that was just too full, too voluminous for the wearer. And we need to take out both in length and in circumference here. So I've got this laid on the pattern here so I can sort of pinpoint exactly where I want to make this change. I'm going to just transfer some dots here. You can also just measure along your rise here to kind of figure out where that's at, or maybe in relation to something else. This one has a dart, so I can kind of tell, you know, if this is the end of the dart, this is kind of the peak of where I want to make the adjustment. Where am I at in relation to that? That'll help as well. But as long as you're in the neighborhood, I think it's going to be okay. All right, now we're going to measure our amount on our pattern here. And remember, we're going to 0 at our side seam here. So we really just want to know the full amount along the rise, and we're going to write it down, and our vertical amount as well, which is about ½ inch. All right, so I'm going to draw in the lines that I transferred where the location is. And I think it's okay if your lines are going to be parallel and perpendicular to your grain line, or if they're going to be parallel to your center back rise and perpendicular. We're reducing the volume and the length exactly where you pinched it out and how you need to pinch it out. So my lines are something like this, parallel to my rise and perpendicular to it. And I'm going to draw these darker for you. I like to look at the adjustment as being really literal. If you know that's exactly what you need to remove and where you need to remove it, as long as your pants are on the grain at the end and they're fitting you and you like them, I think that's great. All right, so here we go. Our black line is the lines we're going to change. Now my pattern has 0 seam allowance on any of the edges except for this inseam right here. So you need to bear that in mind. When I cut up to these points, I'm cutting up to the seam line. This is really important. You don't want to cut up to your cut edge. So if your seam allowance was sticking out here on the side, let's say this ruler represents the seam allowance, we're going to cut up to that point on this side, and we're going to cut up to it on this side, creating that hinge that we need. So if you have a seam line, it's really important to draw in your seam allowances and then stop the cut when it's a hinge right there at that seam line. All right, so we're going to make a hinge. Now our hinges are going to be here at the hem, the waist, and the side seam, and there's no hinge here at the center back rise. Go right up to there, and then if you have seam allowance, you go right up to it on the other side, and then same with here, and then up to it here, and same with your waist, and then up to it on the other side. And now we're going to start overlapping, and I think it's really useful to do one at a time. So we could do our vertical one, the vertical cut, so we're taking out our circumference first. That way this one that goes all the way through the rise is going to be a lot easier to manage. So we're going to overlap this, and my measurement was ½ inch for circumference. So we can mark a parallel notch here at ½ inch. And now we can take our piece and overlap it. You see I'm overlapping it to that little point there. And we'll do the same thing on the lower. And get it nice and flat. Now if you have a pant, this is going to be a really long cut, a little bit hard to manage. You might need to turn it 90 degrees on the table to you if you have that kind of space. And if you're having trouble with like curly paper or something like that, you can set a ruler on it to make it flat, or some weights. All right, so now we've taken that out in the circumference. So we took it out along our vertical cut, and now we're going to take it out along this horizontal cut, and I marked 1 inch. So we're going to mark this. All right, so now we're going to slide our upper pant here kind of down. We're going to close this excess along the rise here. And we're just going to go to touching. Now, if you have seam allowance here, which you likely do, you want to use that seam line. So right here, this is my seam line. So I'm going to touch that line with the seam line. Now, if your seam allowance is sticking out here, you don't want to use the cut edge. You want to use your seam line there. All right, and so now, same thing, I'm going to flatten this out up here. Make sure this is nice and flat. We're not getting any little puckers. All right, so now we have our pant that has decreased volume right here where we wanted it. Now we need to true this up, and we have 2 things we need to do. We need to true up our rise, possibly the side seam, but mostly the rise and our grain line, which is really important. To true up your grain line for pants or shorts, you want that line to be perpendicular to your hem. Now my hem has a slight curve to it, and that's okay. We're going to take our ruler and we're going to line up these 2 points here. And I'll just draw a line here so we have something as a guide. And now that's my perpendicular reference point. So I'm going to lay my ruler up, I line my grid on there, and we're going to line it up. Now you can see this lower grain line here, it's still on track as opposed to these others because they were in these cut sections. But this one here, this one's pretty good. So we're going to use it perpendicular to our hem, and we're going to redraw our grain line just like that, and this is our new grain line. Now if you get a little confused, like hopefully you're not using a Sharpie to do all of your pattern changes like you see here in my hinges. They do kind of look a little bit like arrows in this case. You can cover those up with a little bit of scratch paper. I highly recommend that. And so now you can see here's our new grain line and our pant. So we just need to true this up a little bit. So I'm going to get a small piece of paper, lay it back here, and then I always secure cut pieces on the back. And I would do that on this as well. And I'm going to use the wider one. So this rise line is right here. Whoops, right here. And this one is right here. I'm going to defer to this one. We can always make our pants smaller across, but we really want to try and keep this rise sort of in the true shape that it was. Now right here, it looks like it's swinging out a little too far this way. It's like past the point of our rise here. So we're going to true that up as well. Put a little more paper there. If you have extra waist circumference that you can trim off, you could trim that off. Here is the waist here, like that. That's our line. It's kind of messy, sorry. Now I'm just going to sort of straighten this out a little bit best I can without adding back any of that volume. So maybe you can split the difference a little bit. So there's a few things to think about. Now, if you wanted to just go straight up from this shallower spot along this curve, you're going to lop off almost a 1/2 inch right there at the top because this doesn't have seam allowance. So I know that that right there is about a 1/2 inch. You might not want to lose 1 inch in circumference across the back there. So you might want to add it more like this where we're straightening it out, but this adds a tiny bit up here. So you have to ask yourself, is that going to be okay? And then what you can do is you can always look at this and maybe shave a little at the side seam here, make your dart a little bit smaller. Some things that there are other tools available to you than just doing the cuts that we did. So we're going to bring that back down. We've still decreased a lot of volume here. We decreased 1 inch in length and a 1/2 inch in circumference, so an inch total. And we've added this up here. So I think that's pretty reasonable. And plus the Sharpie's gonna make that look a lot fatter than that really is. So here we have our new rise line. So let's trim this off here. And then you always wanna make sure you're gonna have a nice smooth transition here at your center back. And there we have our back with a decreased volume right here. We have our new grain line, and I really would cover up a lot of these extra lines here so that you're not confused. You can just take some paper, something like this, just to let your eye see the grain line in a continuous way. There we go. Let me show you how this looks. We'll cut one and sew it up and see how it looks on the dress form. Oh, here we go. Let's see if we've got a better fit this time. Not too baggy in the bum. And I just usually try and let it hang free. Sometimes even at this inseam here, I'll just let it hang free to make sure everything's hanging okay. The fit of this pant here is not very tight, not very loose. It could still go tighter or looser. It's sort of a neutral fit, no yoke, it's just a dart. So you can sort of see now the butt is not baggy anymore. You know, sewn to the back here. It's kind of hard to picture a mirror image, but that's kind of what you're looking for here. This muslin's a little more wrinkly, sorry about that, but here we go. Much nicer fit, not too baggy. All right, in this example here, you can see that it's really tight right here. You can see these drag lines are pointing at the rear here, the fullest part. And you'll sometimes even see drag lines coming from here, sort of like when you need a full bust adjustment on a bodice. So this might present in different ways, and the fullness of your bum might be in a different area. But you can see that this right here is just too tight, diagonal drag lines here. And so to figure out how much you need to increase this, ideally you're going to be able to cut, and we're going to try and determine how much length and circumference that we need. So this is right here is the rise. This is the waist right here. The lights in here are pretty harsh, so you're going to see every little wrinkle on this. And if you are uncomfortable cutting your muslin, then you're going to have to do some trial and error. So, and you could probably figure out at least your circumference by unpicking the side seam right here and seeing how much it spreads apart, and then maybe just doing some sort of guessing for the length. You can try pulling the pants down and seeing like, okay, how much do I need to pull these down to get some of these drag lines to go away, and then you'll see how much up here the gap is. You know, you unpick it from your waistband. So yeah, otherwise, if you can cut your muslin, let's see if we can cut this without cutting the dress form or the person. And I understand it's really hard to do this on yourself. Pull this back to the rise here. We're going to cut this way a little bit. And I'm not going to cut all the way to the rise quite yet. Now I'm going to turn this and cut this way. All right. So you can already see it's relaxing a lot now. Let's pull this over. This, you know, you're not sewing 1/2, you're fitting a whole pant usually, so it's going to be a little bit easier. We can kind of relax all this here and see how much we can add here. And now we're going to be measuring this gap going this direction and the gap going this direction, making sure that I'm not pulling on it too much. But on a person, it's probably going to relax really naturally. In fact, this is what I would do if I were going to do this and I was alone. I would take the muslin, draw some lines where, you know, I've already determined where the fullness on me is, and kind of drawn on that. Maybe I'm doing it in a video blind. And then I take it to the table and I'm going to cut my lines. And when I do that, and this one actually would go all the way up to here, and this one will go through the rise eventually, and you can sort of see better how the gap forms. So then if I really wanted to try and piece a piece of fabric in there, that's when I would do that. I would attach the fabric probably to either the lower part right here or the vertical, and this vertical line is going to go all the way down to the hem here. So you can still see there's some drag lines right here, and that's because we haven't released it all the way down. Slipping that muslin in there is going to be really tricky, but it's not impossible. And at least, you know, if you're like, okay, I've tried this on, maybe these will stick to your undergarments, these little flappy bits here, and then you can kind of go, all right, I kind of have an idea of what this gap is. I'm going to pin a piece of muslin in there, take them off, put them on the table, pin a piece of muslin, maybe a piece of colored fabric in there, and sort of imitate it, and then you'll get a really good idea. So, you know, I know a lot of people don't want to cut, but you could get a lot of valuable information there, and you could probably catapult the fitting process if you're willing to sacrifice your muslin, and that's why I always recommend using something you don't really care about too much afterward. All right, and let me show you how to change this. For this one here, it was too tight on the bum there. We had the drag lines pointing to this location here, and I recorded how much it was needing to be released. I don't think I told you in the previous video, but I wrote it down, and the circumference here was about 3/8 of an inch, and then the length we needed 5/8 along the rise there. So this cut right here would go all the way to the hem. I didn't have that on there. It would be a little hard to manage on you, but you can kind of get the idea. Especially on pants, that would be really tricky to try and fit that with the slit going all the way down unless you're kind of adding some muslin back there. But it does go to 0 at the waist, the side seam, and the hem, just like on the full seat adjustment. So we're going to locate this area here on the pattern, which is about right here, and can transfer the lines here. And again, I think that this line being parallel to your center back is fine, and then this line here being roughly perpendicular to that works great. Put it where you need it. That's really the most important thing. So I'm going to draw this in Sharpie. I don't recommend using Sharpie, but it's going to be more visual for you to be able to see what we're doing. Let's make that a better perpendicular amount. And so now I don't have any seam allowances on this pattern piece here, but we can actually add some in on this one since it's not cut out and show you how that would look if there were seams. All right, so I put in some seam allowances on these edges here, and I'll put some here, just so you can see what it looks like when you're doing these changes with this pattern with seam allowances. So we're gonna make a hinge here, here, and here. So that means we're gonna cut up to this point on this side of the seam and up to it on the other side as well on all of the, oh, this one's not a hinge. These three are. So there's our hinges. And we're gonna go straight through on this one all the way to the side seam, stop at the seam line, and then you're gonna cut to the other, on the other side of it up to that same point. And we're gonna do the same at the waist and the hem. All right, and we're gonna get some paper to slip behind here. I always like having a few strips of paper laying around. All right, so let's lay this one under our vertical line first. We're gonna do that one first. This is a pretty fussy change because it's such a large pattern piece. And let's add a little bit more paper to the top here. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna secure some of this so it's not so crazy to deal with. So I'm gonna secure this piece here, this nice long cut, and we're just gonna tape it to the excess paper. And now we're going to add a parallel amount that we need to increase this, and now we're gonna join this one to it, just like that. So we've added the 3/8 that we need right here. I'm going all the way down to nothing at the hem. Make sure this is nice and flat. Don't let it get all warbled. You can lay your rulers on things, put weights down, anything to keep it nice and flat. All right, so now we're going to do the upper one. And we're going to have to cut this to keep it separate, because we're going to still pull these together as well. All right, so now we're going to tape this one down just to secure it, make it a little easier to deal with. And now we can do the same thing on this one. We're going to draw our 3/8. That's the additional circumference right here, parallel to this. And now we're going to swing this over to that line right there, and we'll secure it. So now we've got our additional circumference, so that's great. And now we just need to add some height. So let's add our other piece of paper here. And I'll usually secure one first. So I'm going to peel this back, lay it on here, and then we're going to tape this one down. As long as we have enough for our adjustment, enough paper here, we're okay. Keep it nice and flat. Everything's flat. All right, and now we're going to add our height, and we're working on the seam line. So if this is the seam line here and here, we're going to add it right there at that spot. Not at the cut edge, because that'll change the amount that you're adding. And now we're going to slide this down, keep everything nice and flat until our seam line touches that line, just like that. And we'll secure it. This is a very tape-heavy adjustment. So now we have our additional circumference in this wedge right here that goes to nothing at the hem. And then we have our wedge here that adds a little bit of length to go over the bum. And now we just need to true up our seam. So along here at the rise, I would probably err on just sort of smoothing this out right there. The hem is probably going to have a little point here. So if you have a straight hem, you're going to need to re-straighten it by drawing a line between your two points of your seams, your out seam and your inseam. Draw a straight line between those two, like that. Or mine's curved, so I could blend it in. And then the side seam is probably going to be the easiest one to blend. So you just want to make sure that you add back your seam allowance there in a nice smoothed way here. We don't want a divot there. And same with the waist. The waist is probably going to be pretty easy as well. So now our last thing to do is add our grain line back. And the grain line is always perpendicular to the hem. And this grain line got pretty mangled in this adjustment here. So what we need to do, no matter what your hem looks like, you're going to draw a straight line between your inseam and your outseam, just like you were if you were truing a straight seam, like this. And now the traditional place to put it is smack dab in the middle, but that's okay. You can kind of push it off to the side. As long as it's perpendicular to the hem, you're okay. So we'll push it over here so it's sort of out of the way of our adjustment. It is going to intersect our dart here, so maybe bearing that in mind if you don't want it to intersect with your dart. So there's our new grain line. And like I've said in other things, I usually will take a piece of paper and cover up stuff like this or trace a new copy, because these kinds of adjustments and drawings and cuttings and things can be a little distracting, and you don't want to cut on the wrong line or follow the wrong line for when you go to cut and sew your garment out, which is what we're going to do now, and we're going to test it out. So we've made our adjustment. I like to let it hang straight down. That looks a lot better. It no longer has all the drag lines pointing right here, and you can see it's hanging nice and loose. It's not cupping or constricting, and the rise is in the right place. All right.